Alrighty, so good morning everyone and welcome. So today we're going to be having a look at our next goal. Last lesson we looked at how to find the principal. Now I want to be able to find the interest rate. So I want to be able to find little I. So let's have a look through. Alrighty, so when is this going to come up? Well, it's going to come up in the situation in which I know how much money I've got to have, how much money I've got, and I've got to then know how many years or how much time I've got to actually get the amount of money I want. And the interest rate is going to tell me how big my interest rate needs to be for me to get my goal. Okay? So let's have a think about it. Well, okay, so in 2 years, I want to go to Japan. And I've worked out the trip cost. It's going to cost me about $4,000. Now, I've got sitting in a bank account $3,500. Okay, so I only need $500 extra, and I've got other stuff that I want to pay for, so I don't want to just save it up. I want $3,500 to become $4,000. So I've got a starting amount, I've got a finishing amount, and I've got amount of time. What's my interest rate? Well, compounding periods do matter, but often you're not going to know your compounding period. Well, sometimes you will. In this case, let's just assume that the interest would be compounded yearly. Okay? So, don't need to play around with my n or anything. So I've got my n, I know how many years I want, I've got my a, my future value, and I've got my p, my starting value. Now, like with the previous one, there's going to be a trick. So you're just going to want to watch out for that trick. This one's a little bit harder, but it's not impossible. So I'll show you how it goes. Let's start off by substitution. This is the second trick. Last thing I got to do. Okay, so what did I do? Well, I substituted in like before. That's what happened here. I just substituted. If you look at the blue, ignore my red. Then afterwards, I noticed, okay, I've got to get to I, right? I's in the middle. First thing I got to do, get rid of that 3,500 at the front. So let's divide both sides by 3,500. Done that. I got 8/7 on the left. If you had 1.14, which I think is the decimal approximation, it's the same thing. It's just a little bit more exact if you leave it as fractions. So if you can leave it as a fraction, it's perfectly fine either way. But now I've got this little 2 here, and that little 2 I've got to get rid of. How do I get rid of a little 2? Well, I take the second root, Okay, so I took the second root, and then that gave me 1.069, and I'm left with 1 plus I on the right-hand side. Take 1 off both sides, and I'm left with 0.069 for my interest rate. As a decimal, convert that into a percentage, and you're finished. So it's a long process. It's much longer than the first one, and this is probably the hardest algebraic one. And it is tough. It isn't easy. So it is a really good idea to actually have a go at something like this. Alrighty? So, it always comes in those two steps though. There's always a division by the principal, and then there's always taking the nth root. Now be really careful when you do it on your calculator. This is the most common mistake. A lot of people will get it to look like this. If they wanted to do, we'll do the second root of 8/7 like what I had before. A lot of people end up writing it like this. But that's not what we're actually trying to do. It looks kind of like what we're trying to do. We've actually used the wrong button. The button we're actually looking for is here, our X button with the little box, but we're actually looking above it, the shift version of that button. This is the one we want. So that way we can type in our n into there. So in this case, for me, it was 2. And inside the box, that's where I would put my 8/7. And you'd see that there's not a huge difference between those two looks, but they will give you very different answers, okay? And so that's where I got my 1.069 from. And I rounded there. You always want to try to round as little as possible in questions like this, because a small amount of rounding early on is going to make a huge difference later on, okay? So just be really mindful of that. Alrighty, so long bit of process. I want to leave it up so that you can try to copy it as you go through, and I'll try to leave as much of it as the same as possible, okay? So I'm going to make it 3 years, $4,000, and we'll say $3,000 instead, okay? So, starting with $3,000, I want to make $4,000 in 3 years. Alrighty, compounded yearly. Pause here, see how you go. Alright, so this one is a little bit trickier. Like, this whole process is not easy, but it is the same every time. 1 plus I to the power of n. 4,000 is equal to 3,000. First step, the divide. This is where I'm being careful. Make sure you use the Shift X hat button. One. Take 1 off both sides, and we are finished. Got to convert it to a percentage though, and we get 10% as our final interest rate. Alrighty, that's some tough questions. I'm going to make it just a little bit harder. So if you're up to this point, that's fine. maybe pause the video, rewatch it, have a go at a few simple yearly questions. It's going to get one step harder. Okay? And the one step harder was that we were looking at compounding yearly. Now I want to look at compounding monthly or daily or quarterly, whatever it may be. So, let's have a look. I've got $1,000 and I want to turn it into $1,500 and I want to do it in 5 years. And most of the banks I've had a look at, they all do it the same way. They compound monthly. I went to ANZ, I talked to them all and they all said the same thing. Everyone compounds monthly. It's the current in fashion thing. So no way I'm not going to get something that's a monthly rate, so I may as well assume that. Alrighty, well, most of it's nice and easy. My principal's still a principal. My future value is still my future value. And my n is still my n. Except I do have to play with my n a little bit, because now I'm not thinking in years, I'm thinking in months. So n is equal to 60 months. So it's a pretty big number. Alrighty. Now we've got to go through and have a look at it by substituting into my formula. First step. So this is going to be a bit more of a complicated one. Make sure you use the right button. And we're not going to get a very big answer, I don't think. Yeah. So we get 1.00678. Fix up my colors. Alrighty, turn that into a percentage. And that's 0.678% is my interest. Except the problem with that is that that's not my interest rate for the year. That's my monthly interest rate. And if you go to a bank and ask for a monthly interest rate, you'll probably find that they don't have any idea of what you're talking about, because they only deal in per annum, which means that in order to convert that from monthly back into per annum, got to multiply by 12. And this is going to give me my true yearly rate. And my true yearly rate is 8.14% per annum. Okay? I've rounded up there. Alrighty, so same system, but there's 2 extra steps. You've got to do your conversion up the top to get things in the right thing, and then your answer is a monthly percentage instead of a yearly percentage. So you do have to convert it the same way we normally would. Alrighty, Last question of this lesson. We'll say it's $1,000, 15,000, 150, 1,500 is what we want to have in the end. I'll say 5 years. And this time I'll say it's compounded quarterly. Alrighty, so pause the video, have a go. Bit of a toughie, not impossible. Alright, so let's go. P-A-N. Got to do my little trickery with the N though, because it is compounded quarterly. 5 years becomes 20 quarters. And now, got to go through and start working out everything else. So the most common mistake is going to be right here. Why? Because you're not using shift this button here, X hat. Ooh, dropping my calculator. If you don't get that symbol, you are not going to be able to do the root correctly. And if you got this one wrong, that's your first check. Okay? Notice how many decimal places I keep. It's for a good reason. It's for a really good reason. Lots of errors happen in questions like this because of early rounding. Take 1 to finish off the question. 0.0204 equal to I, except no, because that's not a percentage. So it's really 2.04%. Except no, that's a quarterly percent. And what we want is a per annum. So I've got to times by 4 again. And it's going to give me 8.16% per annum. Alrighty. Hope that wasn't too difficult. Bit of algebra in there. Hope you had a good time, and I'll see you next time. Bye.